TGI peers, it's Monday the 6th and about, let's see, almost 4 o'clock and I'm home. It's totally freaking me out. I can't believe that I'm home on a Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. But that's the nature of things. Of course, my wife can't believe I'm at home on Monday at 4 o'clock. Saw patients in the office this morning. For those of you who are wondering, we are seeing folks in the office taking the necessary precautions to keep you and our staff safe, but we're staying open to meet your needs. So if you've got some issues, we're there to help you out. But needless to say, we're spacing out people, so we're keeping our density of patients at a minimum, but we are seeing folks. So I was seeing people in the office, and I was doing some telemedicine visits, which, by the way, I'm going to put the link up there. If you've got some issues and I can help out with telemedicine, just click that link and you'll find a time and come on in. So we were doing that, but gosh, I'm here at home at 4 o'clock. It is gorgeous, it's beautiful, and I don't know what to do with myself. And my wife's going nuts because she's just saying, can't you find something to do? Can't you do something productive besides sitting around here and getting in my way? She's not used to this, and I don't blame her. I bet a lot of you are in that situation. You're finding yourself, whether it's your spouse or your kids that are home and you're just not used to that, and or maybe you're home and you're not used to that, and it's kind of creating a little bit of anxiety. But we're dealing with it beautifully. We each are. She's doing her thing, I'm doing mine. We're trying to do as much together and make the most of this time together, and kind of getting a little preview of what retirement would be like. I don't know about you, but I'm not so sure I'm ready for that. I think I'm ready to go back to the office and work full time. I just need that, and she needs that probably more than I do. Anyway, today we got a little update from the head and the heart. We're going to start with the head part, and I'm going to teach you a new word you might already know, but it's a fun word. It's called fomites. F-O-M-I-T-E-S, fomites. It basically is just a porous or non-porous substance that can harbor virus and can serve as a tool for transmission. Long and short of it, it's just a surface that you could touch and get the virus from. And that's gained a lot of interest lately. I mean, that's a great word, though. You could use that at your next cocktail party. You know, you're sitting there talking to somebody and say, you know, Sally came up to me the other day and she thought she got herpes from a fomite. And that'll freak them out. They'll love that because they'll think that she was messing around with somebody from some country named Foam, you know, the fomite. Now, actually, it's just any surface that potentially can conduct a viral. And that's so important right now, and so many people are so concerned about it because not only do we hear about the aerosols and wearing the mask and the droplets, but we also know that sometimes from touching certain surfaces, you can get the virus. That's what happens. You touch the surface, then you touch your face, you put your finger in your ear, or you do all the little things that do you realize, this is something I've noticed, I touch my face a lot more than I really consciously knew beforehand. I think a lot of people come to that realization, but it's true. But that's how you get stuff from the fomites. That's a misperception. Some people think, oh, if I touch something, then it's going to get my skin. No, these viruses do not penetrate into your system that way. They have to go through a mucous membrane or an orifice or a hole. They can't just crawl through your skin and get in that way. So it's touching some of these fomites, some of these things, and then touching you and self-inoculating into the facial area is what makes it so important. The other thing that kind of confuses people are viruses are what these particular viruses are called obligate parasites. Now, obligate parasite, it's not that 30-year-old kid who lives in the basement and just eats all your Cheetos and steals the extra toilet paper. They are kind of an obligate parasite. But basically with a virus, an obligate parasite has to have its host to survive. It can't really survive for any length of time outside without being in a animal or a human cell. Because the way a virus proliferates, the way a virus survives, it's not like it can exist on its own without other hosts, because it depends on those host cells. It depends on the manufacturing capability of a host, you and me, cells to be able to make more of the virus. And that's the only way a virus can reproduce. It can't do it by itself unless it's infecting a cell. That's the only way it can have sex, is by infecting a cell, and it makes millions of little babies after it infects that cell, but it's got to have that cell. So that's what an obligate parasite. That's why you hear about viruses, some viruses that can exist for longer periods of time because of evolutionary development. Well, the coronavirus is one that can exist, but in very, very limited time frames, which is good for us. And that's what this whole idea about fomites is about, is what can we look at to really determine what is our risks involved in touching things like cabinets and doorknobs and toilet seats and all that kind of stuff. Well, there's a couple of studies that have come out recently which I think are very enlightening and helping us to understand a little bit more. Now, we knew from studies back, even as far back as 2007, a study that came out of the World Health Organization that looked at coronaviruses. And remember, coronaviruses is just a broad umbrella category of a whole bunch of viruses that we're very familiar with. We see these things all the time. That's just a family of viruses. Why this one's special is it's a new type of coronavirus. And that's why we can make some assumptions about it, but we can't make all assumptions about it, because it acts like all these other coronaviruses that we've seen around, MERS, SARS, and a bunch of other things that we've seen for years. But then it has some of its own unique properties, and that's why all this excitement and work is being done on this particular virus to try to understand its particular characteristics. It's like a new baby, a new baby. We've seen a lot of babies before. We can make generalizations about babies in general, but each baby is a genetic mixture of two unique individuals. There's no single person on the universe that has that same genetic imprint. So we can make certain assumptions about it, but it's going to do things a little differently than the next baby. So the same thing with these viruses. We can do all these models all day long, but because this is new, these are only just models. I love the concept they talk about. It says all these models you talk about on the presidential briefing when they talk about the different models of predicting these kind of things. I love the expert who said all models are wrong. Some models are useful. And what I mean by that is these models are so dependent on assumptions that are made. We're going to do this. It's going to act this way. Or little variations in that model could completely blow up. I got excited there, almost knocked over my water. Can completely blow up the results of that model. I'm getting off track. Let's go back to the fomites. I don't want to lose track of the fomites. So these were a couple of studies that came out, one in the Lancet about 2 or 3 days ago, and one in the New England Journal of Medicine about 10 days ago, that talk specifically about the COVID-19 virus, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And it started out looking at temperature. And they did an experiment where they kept the virus at 4 degrees Celsius. And for you folks who are rushing to your computer to figure out Celsius to Fahrenheit, 39.8 degrees Fahrenheit. And they found that the virus did quite well. The virus survived well for the length of time that the virus would normally survive in a culture medium where it could reproduce. So then they incrementally increased the temperature of the culture media, and they found that when they got to about 70 degrees Celsius, which is 158 Fahrenheit, then the time for the virus inactivation was only about 5 minutes. Now, you may be saying, well, it's hot in Augusta, but it's just not 158 yet. It'll get there, but it's just not there yet. So unless you're, picnicking and hanging out in Death Valley, you're probably not going to hit those 158 temperatures. But what that does tell us is it's a curve. So the hotter it got, the more inactivated the virus was. So it goes back to what we talked about a little while back, is that heat and humidity seem to be the two things that this virus does not like very well. We also know that UV sunlight can be virucidal, kills viruses. So the combination of of the heat, the humidity, and the UV light has all been very positive for reducing the viral load, reducing the ability of viruses when they're on these fomites. Being exposed to those things decreases the length of time that the virus can survive on those types of sub or what's the word? Surfaces. I knew there was a word out there. It's tough getting old, let me tell you. All right. So there was another study that decided, well, we're not just going to look at temperature. We're going to look at particular surfaces, particular items that are commonly used, and see, well, how can this virus survive on those? And again, this is how long they can survive by themselves, so that they potentially could be transferred to a human or a bat or whatever. Although I'm not too concerned about bats anymore. So they looked at a variety of surfaces like paper, toilet paper, of course, they had to check that, wood, cloth, glass, money, stainless steel, plastic, and even surgical masks. And basically what they found was that no infectious virus was recovered from paper or toilet paper, interestingly enough. Now, I don't have any toilet paper to show you, but you all know what that is. After about 3 hours. I thought that was fascinating. So paper and toilet paper is not a good medium for this virus to survive in. Wood and cloth was interesting, that they were able to detect some virus for up to 2 days afterwards. Now I'm going to contextualize. Don't freak out. Don't lose it just because I said 2 days. I'm going to contextualize that for you in a minute. It seems to be more stable on smooth surfaces. And that's why countertops and those types of things are so important to disinfect. When they looked at glass and money, they were able to detect it after 4 days. Now again, please don't freak out. Plastic and stainless steel was about day 7. However, the important caveat there is they were incredibly careful and sensitive in their detection. In other words, the amount of virus they could detect at that 2 or 3 or 4 days was 1/1000th of what was initially inoculated. So remember back when we talked about a critical part of infection, not only getting infected, but the severity infection is based on viral load. That's a concept that simply means how much of the garbage you get into your system. The less you get in, the better off you do. Very simple. So what they're showing is these numbers that you're hearing about in the press, and you're seeing these studies, and they're saying, oh, I can live on this stuff for 3, 4, 5. They're not giving you the fine details. They're not telling you that, yes, they detected the virus, but it was in much, much, much lower amounts than originally inoculated. And there's some evidence that these lower amounts make it much less likely that they would cause the same level of infection. We don't know at this point, for example, and what I want to know is, what's the likelihood of someone getting infected after this doorknob was inoculated for 2 hours or 5 hours or 10 hours? You know, quite honestly, we're never going to do that study because it's just not practical. You can't do that with human subjects. Now, we could get a bunch of monkeys and, rub their hand on the doorknob and, rub their hand in the toilet. I don't know how to do that stuff, but we're not going to see those studies. So quite honestly, this kind of data is the best we're going to get. So what's the practical take home for something like this? Yes, you've got to be careful. You've got to do the things that we've been talking about from the very beginning. Be careful about proper hand washing. In all these studies, every single one of them, they've shown that when people were exposed to those surfaces and then washed their hands properly with soap and water for that 20 seconds, row your boat, you know what I'm talking about, it eliminated the virus in a great degree. In fact, there was another study about the virucidal effects, or the virus killing effects of disinfectants, and it was really positive, because basically you could just dump almost about anything and it's going to kill these viruses when they're on these surfaces. They looked household bleach, hand soap, ethanol, and remember with hand sanitizer it needs to be at least 60% ethanol to be effective, and most of them all now that are being produced are above that. Providone iodine, which is betadine, chlorhexidine, which are things like in Physoderm, Physohex, that kind of thing. And basically what they found is that there were no infectious particles when a surface was inoculated, and then they cleaned them with all these different things, whether it's the Clorox, whether it's the sanitizer, hand wipes, and virtually every one of them, after 5 minutes, they couldn't culture any viruses from that surface. So that's really, really positive. And it just goes to the fact that, clean these surfaces, clean them regularly, use the disinfectant, use the hand disinfectant, use the hand sanitizer, don't play on your face, and just don't be freaked out about these things that you're seeing with regards to the fomites. Remember, that's the word for the day. Don't be freaked out when you see the studies that say, oh my gosh, they could live on cardboard for 3 days. That's completely taken out of context. It's taken completely out of, these are studies done in bench labs under controlled circumstances, under controlled situations, which truly aren't real life. So you got to put it in context. Don't be dumb. Don't, just use common sense and do the things we've been told to do. And my message today is just don't freak out when you see some of those studies. You've got to dig deep. You've got to get into the data to really understand that the transmission on these fomites, on these surfaces, is real. It can happen. But if you take the necessary precautions, it's been shown that simple disinfecting techniques can wipe out any risk from that particular exposure. So that's the head part of today. Now I want to go to the heart part of today. I wanted to just touch on briefly the concept, and I've been thinking about this a lot, the concept of what you do now really determines what happens later. Let's think about that, not so esoterically, but the reality is what's happened before, it creates memories, it influences who we are because of our thoughts, and we're largely a part of our memory and our past, but we can't undo that, obviously. Our present is where we're at. That's all we can influence, except our future. We can influence that by what we do now. I think a perfect example is what Dr. Fauci talks about when he's talking about these graphs. And I love it. Don't you love it when he just slaps down those journalists? These cocky journalists think they know something about science, and they get up there and they ask these stupid, jerky, gotcha questions, and Fauci just gets up there and slaps them upside the head in his nice way. I mean, the guy's as sweet as can be, but he gets up there and he just puts them in their place by really explaining the science. The other day I was listening, and they were talking about, well, how can you be so optimistic when you say this is going to be the worst week, but yet you see the light at the end of the tunnel, and how can you be contradictory? And Fauci just looks at him and says, well, if you understand the science and you understand about how the graph works, that what happens now is the leading edge, and it's the best predictor of what's going to happen later. And obviously that's reassessed on a daily basis, because what's happening now is now, and that changes between now and tomorrow. But that still is the best predictor of next week and the week after that. So I love it when he explains that in his nice grandfatherly terms, and you see these journalists just slink down into their seat, and as they realize that they've been way over their head. But he does it in such a nice way. I wish Trump would learn a little bit of his tact from Fauci. But anyway, my point is, just as those graphs are leading indicators, your behavior now with regards to your health and your wellness is the best leading indicator of what's going to happen down the road. I think it's important to put this into perspective. Doing good stuff now, and by that I mean nutrition, exercise, getting adequate rest, de-stressing, that's not going to decrease your chance of getting this virus. It's not even going to decrease your chance of surviving this virus. Oh, and by the way, do you know if you die this year, here's a great statistic, if you die this year, there's a 99.67% chance that you're going to die from something other than the coronavirus. So that kind of tells me that, yes, this is a difficult time, but there's a whole lot else going on with our health besides just this right now. Of course, we're focused on it, and that's what I'm doing now, is talking about this, and I'm doing it for a reason, because it's on our minds. It's very important for us. But I don't want us to lose the sight of the bigger picture, and that's our overall health and wellness. So my point is, the things you are doing now, it's not going to make a hill of beans on this particular event. I mean, I'm sorry, but that train's left the station. If you've got type 2 diabetes or you're 60 pounds overweight, you're not going to change that in the next 2 weeks. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. You're not going to dramatically improve your immune status in the next couple of weeks. That's not to say you can't start, because by what you're doing now, you're going to be that leading edge for the future. You're going to be helping to prevent that 99.3% of other health issues that are much more likely to create havoc in your life 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, when coronavirus is a memory that will affect all of us. And I don't want to discount the impact that it's having now, both economically and physically. But I hope you get my point, is that by making changes now, don't do it for the immediate effect. And I know I'm going totally against psychology there, because changing behavior is mitigated on the idea that you get an immediate effect. You get that reinforcement right off the bat. We know from psychology that someone is more likely to repeat a behavior if they get an immediate positive reinforcement. Well, that's very difficult in health, because usually it takes weeks, months to years to see the benefit of changing lifestyle, of changing behavior. So I know I'm going against the norm, but I think you guys, especially you WOW folks, are bright enough to know and see the benefits of being on that leading edge. You know, as Fauci said the other day, we're going to see a horrible week. We're going to see an increase in deaths. But what that is predicting is down the road, we're going to go over the hump and we're going to start seeing all that improve. Well, by making changes today in your nutrition, your activity level, your mindset, your stress, all the activities that we know can enhance your health, that becomes the best predictor of what's going to happen 6 months, a year, 2 years. And I know that's hard to do. I know that it's difficult to view that far down the way. But the reality is, what happens to us during that time frame is going to be much more important to the vast majority of us than these next 2 or 3 weeks. So let's continue doing what we're doing. Let's continue doing the hand washing to make sure that we eliminate the problem with fomites. And just keep in mind that what you're doing now is really the only thing you do control. And that's what's going to control that future, that health risk down the road, which is much more important than these next 2 or 3 weeks. You got to figure most of you folks got many, 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 many years to go. I'm counting on it for myself. So it only makes sense to let that be our vision, let that be our focus, let that be our purpose. Do what we need to do in the acute, but don't forget about the big picture. We'll all be better off for it. So until we get together again, hey, Martha Ann, Trina, Dolly, LaWanda, Teresa, Virginia, Karen, Lisa, Vicky, Sharon, Nancy. Thank you guys. Again, thank y'all so much for being a part of this. Please tell your family and friends if they will benefit from this. We're going to try to do it again as more frequent. I had somebody ask me the other day, they said, well, gosh, it's so great that you're doing these viral updates and you started this Facebook page. Well, you know, we started this 2 years ago before anybody even thought anything about coronavirus. I didn't even know what a coronavirus was. So this is not anything new. This is not the Rahm Emanuel manual of never let a good crisis go to waste. You know, this is just an opportunity during this crisis to try to get information out on a regular basis. But go back, look, we've been doing the WOW Facebook page for probably 2 or 3 years now. I don't even remember when we started. So we're capturing the moment and trying to meeting the needs in the immediate moment, but consistent with what I just said about looking at the big picture. That's what we've been doing for a couple of years, and that's what we're going to continue to do for a couple of years. So yes, we're going to zero in like a laser beam on this particular crisis right now, but part of my role is to keep your perspective, is to try to give you some context as to where we're going with that. And all you have to do is look at the history of this page and know that we're not a fly-by-night operation. The minute coronavirus gets better, I'm not going away. We're going to be with you, because women's health, our purpose is to provide a community that supports women and their health needs, whether it has to do with coronavirus or the multitude and myriad of other issues that come up. So I would encourage you to go back and look at some of the older videos. I mean, we're covering all kind of topics, and we're going to go back to that at some point. Obviously, we want to meet your immediate needs right now, but just know that we're here for the long term, as I know you are. So until we get together again, say it with me, make healthy choices.